Hey, my name's Tom Bills, and I want to welcome you to this episode of the Art of Lutherie podcast. Today I'm going to be talking about my favorite tools for fret installation. One of the most common questions that I get, it seems like it's almost daily, but for sure every week, someone writes in and says, or contacts me on Facebook or something and says, I'm just starting out making guitars, what tools should I get? Because I guess it's a little harder now, I think, for people than it was when I was first starting out. When I started out back in the 90s, there really weren't that many different tools, and most of the time I was finding ways to take regular woodworking tools and sort of repurpose them or use them in some way to do what I needed to do on a guitar. But today, there are so many different places you can get guitar making tools from, and there's a lot to choose from, so I can understand how when you're just starting out, it would be really overwhelming. And so in this video, I'm going to be focusing on my favorite fret installation tools. And the reason why, or one reason why I want to kind of focus in on that is because I remember when I was starting out, I came from a background, if you know my story, if you've seen my interviews or whatever, if you have my book, I think I talk about in there a little bit of my history, but I came from a long line of cabinet makers and carpenters and things like that. So when I started making my first guitar, I had access to some of the basic woodworking stuff, like I used my dad's table saw. My grandfather gave me an old scroll saw that he found in a junkyard and fixed. He was one of those guys. I still have his old drill press that he got from a junkyard and repaired and put a new motor on and all that stuff. Just keep it for the sentimental value, and it still works too, actually. But anyway, so I had a lot of these basic sort of woodworking tools, and I'm thinking that if you're getting into guitar making, or maybe you've been into guitar making for a while, the woodworking stuff is a little easier to come by. Although in the future I'm going to be doing more videos on tools because I do get a lot of questions about tools. And so I am working, all you guys who have asked me, I am working on some resources for you, talking about what tools you need to get started, featuring some different tools that I think are important, things like that. It's in the works and it's on the way. So if you're not on the email list yet over on theartoflutherie.com, make sure you get signed up so that you'll get notified when those things are available. But the thing that I ran into, a big stumbling block for me when I was building my first guitar, I had the general woodworking tools, but what I really lacked was anything that was specific to guitar making. I didn't have any way to radius the fingerboard. For fret dressing, I didn't have the right things. I didn't have the right kerf of a saw to cut the fret slots or clean the fret slots, or all the other different tools that are kind of unique to guitar making. And so I want to focus in today in this video, and I'm going to show you some of my favorite tools for fret installation, which are a lot of those really unique kind of tools, and just kind of briefly take a look at those. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut to a clip here, which is a sample taken from one of my courses from the Luthier's Edge library called Fretwork Mastery. And this video is just one of the introductory videos about tools, where I walk through and I show you each tools, my favorite tools for fret installation. I think I explain a little bit about why, but it's more of a general overview of which ones I use, a little bit of why I use them, and why they're my favorites. And what I'm going to do is, in case you want to go a little more in depth on these tools, I'm going to put a post on my website as well, which will have this podcast video on it, but below that I'm going to add a link to each one of the tools that I talk about in this next clip that you're about to see. So if you want to purchase them or figure out more about them or anything, you'll have those links there, and hopefully that'll be helpful to you if you're checking those out. So enough talking from me about this stuff, and let's go take a look at some of my favorite fret installation tools. For many different parts of guitar making, the tools we're using are essentially, for the most part, basic woodworking tools. Machines that you could get at any woodworking hardware store or fine woodworking store. But when it comes to fretwork, there are a few tools that are pretty specific that we're going to be using in this course. Now we're going to be talking about the fret installation now. This course is not going to look at the fret dressing and the final setup and things like that. That's going to be a different course. But this particular one is focused completely on installing the frets properly, preparing the fingerboard properly, and things of that nature. So for this course, here's what we're going to need. We're going to need a hammer. I love this hammer. This is the dead blow hammer from Stu Mac. And all these different things I'm about to show you, I'm going to move fairly quickly through them all because there's a lot of different things here. And as we go through the course, you're going to see me using them and see them more up close and hear a little more about them. So I'm going to briefly just run through these so you'll know what they are when you see them in the later videos of the course. Okay, so this is the dead blow hammer from Stu Mac. I've used all different types of hammers over the years, but I absolutely love this little guy. It's got just a little bit of buckshot in there or something, and so it's just a lot more efficient at keeping it from bouncing up and seating the fret properly. I love this. I'll probably talk about that more later. This is a little Stu Mac fret slot cleaning saw. This is a really handy little tool. I love this thing. Can't recommend that enough. This is another Stu Mac. I use this for cleaning out the fret slots. It just has a good solid handle. It's a lot better than trying to grip onto a little X-Acto knife like this, although I do use an X-Acto knife too. My trusty scalpel that I talk about often in different courses. I can't say enough good things about having a scalpel. It's just so much better than an X-Acto knife. A thin ruler, just thin enough to get into the fret slot for checking depth. I like to have this one happens to be a Starrett ruler, but it's got a nice square edge so I can make sure that the fret slot is the correct depth and cleaned out all the way up tight into the corner where the edge of the fret meets the binding of the fingerboard. For the radiusing of the fingerboard, I've got 3 different sizes. I've got the big aluminum beams in the different radius that I want to use for the particular guitar. Then I have the smaller size wooden block, and I basically took one of these and cut it in half to get an even smaller size block in case I need to refine different parts of the neck or the fingerboard surface. And we'll be talking about all this stuff more as we get into it. Set of straight edges, or at least one straight edge like this, or longer is even better. But that's an important thing. And if you don't have a fancy straight edge, another way you can make a straight edge is with just 2 pieces of wood. Just take a piece of wood and plane it nice and straight, or plane 2 together and then hold them up to the light, and you can see if they're bowing away from each other and get a fairly decent straight edge doing that. Definitely accurate enough to do this. Okay. Now this isn't a must-have, but this is something I really like. This is the Stu Mac Fret Barber. There are other ways to do this, but basically I use this to trim some of the barbs of my fret wire to have a little more precise control over how tight those frets are going to be fitting into these fret slots. If they're too tight, they could bow the neck back. If they're too loose, they're not going to stay put, right? So there's some subtleties to using that I feel are really advantageous, and which I'll be showing you and demonstrating. And this is a fret press, another Stu Mac purchase here. And I use sort of a combination, as you'll see, where I'm using a combination of the hammer and the press together to make sure that's really seated well in the slot. And I'll be showing you exactly how to do that later. What else? I'm going to be using a little bit of this medium viscosity super glue. I'll show you where when we get going. And I even pull out a little bit of my little Burr Life cutting lubricant that you may have seen in my other tutorials. I'm sure there might be a couple of other things that we're going to get into, but that is the majority of the main tools that I'll be using in this course. So those are some of my favorite tools for fret installation, and like I said, I'll make some links to those over on theartoflutherie.com. I'll put a link in the podcast description to get you to that page so you can check it out. And you can check out some of the other free resources and things that we have on the artoflutherie.com. And that clip, as I mentioned in there, that clip talks about the course a lot because it is from that course. It's called Fretwork Mastery. And you can check that out, watch the trailer and everything else over there on the artoflutherie.com as well. One thing I wanted to mention before, two things actually, before I bring this episode to a close, is this really got me thinking back to when I was first starting making guitars. I think this could be a different podcast altogether, and I might do it actually because it brings up a lot of feelings in me that I think you might be feeling if you're getting ready to start making guitars for the first time. There was a period of 5 years, literally 5 years, when from the time that I first had the idea, I think I should make a guitar, to when I actually made a guitar. And the reason for that is because I let all the people, the negative voices around me, all the little things like I don't have the right tools and other little excuses, stop me from going forward and actually building that first guitar. And I just wanted to throw in a little word of encouragement here to you. You know, you can do it, and it's worth it. And if you're watching this and you've already made a bunch of guitars, you know what I mean. And I think it's important for us to kind of lift each other up and inspire each other too, you know, to go higher, to get started. That's part of it. Inspiration is important. So if you watch this video and you walk away feeling inspired and maybe you take that first step to build that guitar, or you get one of those fret installation tools and you take your fretwork to another level, then I'm thrilled, because that's the goal here, and that's kind of my vision and my dream for what this podcast can accomplish, as well as just kind of being a fun, more informal way for me to sort of communicate and reach out to you guys. But don't let those negative voices stop you. Get creative about ways to overcome things. When I started, I remember one time specifically, my degree is in jazz guitar, so I studied jazz guitar and audio technology in college. That's what I graduated with. And when I was in school, I had to work my way through school. One of my part-time jobs was teaching guitar lessons at a music shop. And I remember I got to this point where I was like, I am definitely, I'm going to build a guitar, because I needed an archtop really bad. And there was no way I was going to be able to buy one just being a struggling student. So I just kept thinking, I think I'm going to build one. And I was all ready to go. And I thought, you know what I'll do? I'm going to talk to the guitar tech at this shop, because he might be able to help me figure out how to actually do this thing that I've been wanting to do for so many years. And so I remember I went and I talked to him, and I said, hey man, I think I'm going to build a guitar. I've got a bunch of experience with woodwork. I think I can do this. And he said, no, you're never going to be able to do it. There's no way. And here's why. You don't have this. You don't have that. Even if you did it, it's going to be crappy. Just don't waste your time on it. And I remember walking away like just feeling crushed and like I wasn't going to do it. And you know what? I didn't do it for about another year after that. And I wish I wouldn't have listened to him. But I'm so glad that I finally did move forward. And even when I did build my first guitar, I still couldn't buy those tools and things. And it so happened that I met a guy who had built 2 guitars, I think, and we struck a deal where he was going to let me use his fretting tools and things for like the fret saw and those things. Those were the things that were holding me up, which is why I wanted to make the video about these sort of fret tools here, because that was a stumbling block for me on guitar number 1. Anyway, this guy, we set up a deal where I paid him $20 an hour to use his tools and his workshop. And so one night a week I went over there, and the first week I laid out my fingerboard and I slotted it with his fret saw. And then the next week I went and did something else with that. And then maybe a couple weeks went by and I got something together, and then when I got back to where I needed those tools again, I went and spent another hour there. And so that's how I made it through on my first guitar. I didn't have all the perfect things. I didn't have a workshop that was awesome and anything. So anyway, I'm saying all this because if something's holding you back, whatever it might be, you can figure out a way. Look for those opportunities and those things to try to get that first guitar done and start moving forward. And the last thing I want to mention is, if you have some ideas on some topics that you'd like me to do this podcast on, send them over to me. I'm really interested to hear what you guys want me to talk about. I've got a lot of things I think are useful, but the goal is to figure out what's important to you. So if you got some ideas, you can contact me through theartoflutherie.com. You can find the contact page there, or you can just send me an email to tom@theartoflutherie.com with thoughts or ideas or comments, or just to say hi. So anyway, thank you again for listening to this podcast or watching this podcast. And that's all for this episode, and I'll see you next time.